there any background noise? I don't know if I need to put it on push to talk.
No, I don't hear a damn thing. We're
All right,
here.
nice.
I just have to make sure people can hear us, so I'm just gonna link this and we're gonna begin.
Nice.
We're already live, but we're gonna begin. Let's see how to link this. Man, I'm so new at this whole streaming thing.
Are you streaming on YouTube?
That's the one. I've done this like 3 times before. I don't remember exactly how to do it. Oh, there's somebody watching. Hi, can you hear both of us? Uh-oh. That's me. Yo, Lavos, say something.
Hey, I'm talking.
You hear him too? He just spoke. Do you guys hear him too? Perfect. Okay, now I just need to figure out how to link this, and we are gonna get this going.
Okay. Is it
Shoot.
recording?
Oh yeah, we've been recording.
All right.
There, I got the link. Alrighty. Gonna drop this, and we are gonna get this going. Link that couple more places real quick. Get this started. All right, that's enough. Other people will link it if they care enough. We can begin this now.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining. I am here with Lavos, who I don't even know how to introduce this man. He is arguably competitive Pokemon's most dominant player. He is also one of the most controversial players in Pokemon history. He is now permanently banned. We're going to go very in depth. This is not going to be a 3 question, 5 minute interview. This could take an hour plus. We're going to really get into it. Lavos is here on the Callus Narrates YouTube channel, and he is for the very first time since his ban over a year ago making his very first public statements, and he's going to be telling his side of the story. We're going to hear exactly what happened and what the future holds. And like I said, this is a Callus Narrates exclusive. This is his very first time discussing this at any point. So, Lavos, first of all, thank you for joining me. Lavos and I have known each other quite some time, almost a decade now. He's been on my Pokemon talks before. He's competed in Callus Invitational. He used a team that I built in SPL like 8-ish years ago. We've even texted outside of the game a couple of times, so I know this guy pretty well. But for those of you who do not, let's start at the very beginning. Lavos, tell us all the way back in the childhood, early days. Where did you grow up? When did you take an interest in gaming? How did we get to where we are?
Oh man, you want me to go way back? First of all, I can't believe it's been almost 10 years since we met. I think it was 2012 on PO.
That's right.
That sounds about right. Yeah. Damn, that's a long time. Let's see. So I was always kind of a competitive person. My first experience with organized competitive games came right before my fourth birthday. I actually found a chessboard in my house and asked my parents to show me how the game worked because I thought the pieces looked cool. My dad taught me how to play, and I got super invested in it. I asked for chess books for my birthday and a subscription to an online chess site. I think it was US Chess or Blitz Chess, one of those. I forget which one. And I would just play obsessively. Like when I got home from school, I would wake up in the morning and like read my chess openings book while I was eating breakfast. I started doing tournaments when I was 5, and I lived in Idaho at the time, so there wasn't like a huge chess scene there or anything. But for almost a year, the every tournament I went to, I won. And so my parents were like, "Oh, he's actually pretty good at this," and they signed me up for like chess camps and stuff like that. I never actually won the state competition. I lost 3 years in a row to the same Asian kid, which is pretty frustrating. Uh, but that was like the start of my competitive gaming career, I guess, if you want to call it that. And then I was interested in video games too. I think I got my Game Boy Advance when I was 7 for my birthday, or no, it was for Christmas, I think, because my brother got one too. He's a couple years younger than me. And I just played like Mario games and kid stuff like that. But I got interested in like speed running when I was 9 or 10, and I had already been into Pokemon. One of my first video games was Pokemon Fire Red version for the Game Boy, and I had played them all like pretty seriously. Would go to like Barnes and Noble with my brother and grab those guidebooks for the Pokemon games. I don't know if you remember those, and just like pour through those and memorize the Pokédex and stuff. Just thought it was really fun. And then kind of discovered the internet around 9 or 10 as well, and just realized there was a competitive Pokemon scene via Pokemon Online. Thought initially that I had to actually import my team like from the cartridges, so I was playing with like level 80 something Gyarados and stuff, but pretty quickly figured out how the whole system worked and EVs and IVs and all that stuff. Yeah, and just got into it. I started on some minor servers. I don't know what direction you want me to go with this, but
So from a very, very young age, we're talking 4 years old, you've been interested in competitive gaming. I mean, you've been into competitive gaming effectively your whole life, from what I'm understanding.
yeah, and I was just always a competitive person. Like I played baseball and football growing up as well, and I was really competitive at those, and like went to state tournaments and that sort of thing. So I've always been really interested in just winning and like being the best at whatever I'm doing.
So tell us about how that transitioned into online Pokemon. When did you play your first online Pokemon match, and what happened from there?
Oh man. So I think the first server I went to, it must have been 2010 because it was Pokemon Online. It was a Poke Battle Center, and I just start. It was right after the Black and White games were released in Japanese in Japan. I think this timeline all tracks so far. And I got into the Dream World OU tier because I thought it was really cool that you could play with like Genesect and Shadow Tag Chandelure and stuff that hadn't been released in the actual cartridges yet. And from there, I just sort of the first quest was to be the best on my own particular server. And so I was really competitive with a couple of guys there, including Dice, who's probably the first guy I met who ended up being on Smogon, although I don't think either of us were on Smogon yet at the time. Just played that for a while, and then people would come to the smaller server from the main PO server or from the Smogon server occasionally and sort of like raid it. And some good player would come over and try to like challenge the best players. So I got caught up in that a couple times and usually got my ass beat. And that's when I decided, I need to go to the main servers where all the really good players are hanging out. I just kind of became a black and white ladder fiend. Basically, the rest of 2010 and 2011, I dabbled in some of the clan culture on Pokemon Online. Which was like the ultra elite cutoff. I think probably only a handful of guys ever did that. Uh, and from there, early 2012, I decided to transition to Smogon because I heard that's where all the really big tournaments were. And it happened to be right around the same time that the World Cup of Pokemon was doing signups. So, signed up for US West because that's the region I was living in at the time, and went to their IRC channel, which was doing open tryouts because they had one member who unexpectedly dropped out pretty late before the tournament was going to start. And I just walked in and said, like, you guys need me. I'm better than all of you, etc. Like being a little kid, uh, challenged Philip 7086 and a couple other players. I think Most Wanted and E are the ones that I played. And I actually won 4 out of the 5 tryout games, despite the teams that I brought being just of my own creation, not really within the metagame. I guess I impressed Phil because he signed me up for the tournament as the 8th Black White OU slot, and the rest is kind of history, I guess.
Well, we'll go a little bit at a time because there's a lot to cover over the course of your career. But you
Yeah, yeah, sure.
right around that time, you played your first SPL. What was it? 2012, 13.
2012 was the first year. Yeah, it was SPL 4, I think.
Okay. Now, how did you get into that, and what were your expectations?
Oh man, this is I don't actually remember my first few SPLs all that well because they were all kind of disappointments for me. Like after World Cup, I went 5-1, and our team ultimately ended up winning. I was still laddering and doing very well at the time. Back then there weren't as many like major tournaments in between World Cup and SPL as there are now. I think I played the Smogon tour in between those two, and ended up getting to the quarterfinals where I lost 2-1 to Malekith. And then I was a pretty hot commodity at the time, so I forget which team picked me up actually, but it wasn't like I had a lot of social connections. People actually, generally speaking, didn't like me because I was 14 years old and wasn't really good at socializing with people on the internet. Uh, but I think I went like 4-5 or something. My record was not very good, and our team didn't make the playoffs, so it was kind of a letdown.
So people hear that.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Wait, can you guys still hear me? Is it still streaming?
There we go. How about now?
Oh yeah, you're back. You're back. I thought it was me, so I turned my internet off and back on.
Yeah,
But
no, it was just my headphones. I told you I was having a problem. I'll deal with it after. Anyway, back to it.
oh, rip.
Okay. So what is it that made you step up to the next level from going, 4-5 average Joe Blow in SPL, good player but not, fantastic player. What took you from that to just the absolute dominant presence that you became? You took a break from the game for a while, right? You didn't play every single SPL from SPL 4 all the way up to your ban, right? There was a period in between where you stepped away, right?
That's right. I didn't play SPL 8. I think I played all the ones between then. Hmm, I might have missed SPL 5 actually, because I took 2 major breaks. One of them was about 6 months, and then the other was about a year. But basically, 2012 through 2016, I was just consistently like a mediocre tournament performer. We never won World Cup again during that period. I always did pretty well in World Cup, and then so in SPL, usually 4-5 or 5-4 average. And then I just got really frustrated because I think in 2016, the last SPL I did, I think it was SPL 7. I ended up our team ended up making playoffs, and there was some sort of tiebreak where I was somehow selected to play. I think I pushed really hard for it, and then I brought like a shitty hyper offense team and got dumpstered. And that really killed my passion for the game because for me, team tournaments were always the most exciting part of the competition. And just letting everyone down like that when I was so sure that I could put the whole team on my back and that sort of thing, that kind of stung. So I stepped back from the game for, I think, a little over 18. And for 2018, I came back right before the classic, and I just went like all out for that one, man. Like the year before I played, I'd actually entered all of them, but I activity disqualified from all except GSC because I didn't really care. And then I ended up winning the GSC Cup, and I missed the playoff qualification by 1 point. So in 2018, I was like, I'm not going to let that happen again. Uh, and I managed to qualify. I forget what seed I was, but obviously ended up winning that tournament. The reason I got
Yeah,
so
let's back up. We're not in 2018 yet. How how did you do it? How did you go from, good but not great, mediocre tournament player to absolutely dominant? Like, how does someone improve meteorically the way that you did to become so dominant?
so there's a couple things I did. First of all, I shifted my focus away from black and white, and I started learning old gens more. I actually started with advanced with third gen, and then fourth gen. BKC taught me a lot about those. M Dragon taught me a lot about those, and I was sort of learning from players better than me and broadening my repertoire a bit because I think people who only play one tier or one gen have a very limited perspective on the game, and it causes them to get caught in habits that better players would know to avoid, since you can't rely on the same play style in completely different environments like ADV versus black and white, for example. And then I sort of discovered my love for GSD by just dabbling in the tier, reading all of Borat's guides, and something about the tier just clicked with me. I felt like no matter what team I picked up or who my opponent was, the game went slow enough and the decision making was complex enough that even if I made a mistake, I wasn't far behind enough that I couldn't recover. And there was always the ability to sort of use that clutch factor to come back in games where it looked like maybe I didn't have so much of a chance. And that aspect of the generation really appealed to me, as well as the simplicity of only having, say 30 or so viable Pokemon and basically only one item that's ever used, which is leftovers. But then how deep and how many layers there are to the tier is really what appealed to me. And honestly, man, I just studied and studied and studied, went back and watched all the old replays that I could find of the tier, listened to all the best players and their advice and what they had to say, while simultaneously not allowing myself to be constrained by those aspects. Because, in black and white, after my initial breakout year in 2012, I kind of became a meta slave, and I just ended up following whatever, BKC or Ojama or McMegan or Dice was doing. Uh, and I think when I struck out on my own and sort of developed my own style in GSC, that's when I really started to find success because, the people who are innovating are the ones leading the charge. They're going to have the advantage. They're going to be one step ahead of everybody else. And if you're following in somebody else's footsteps, you're already playing catch up, in my opinion.
So, providing some context, since we're not on the same page here, it's not all Pokemon. It's not like you're some Pokemon prodigy. Didn't you, at the same time, weren't you also very, very deep in League of Legends, in Hearthstone? Weren't you playing at a very, very high level in other games as well?
Yeah, so in 2016, I was master tier in League of Legends in the jungle role. I was really deep in that for a while. That was sort of during my I'd always played it like since 2013, just casually with my friends, that sort of thing. But during my period of disillusionment with Smogon and with competitive Pokemon, I started to pick that up more. And then I also played Hearthstone. It wasn't until 2017 that I got really good at that, but I peaked rank one on the America server. I qualified for a couple of the Masters tournaments. Back then it was called the HCT qualifiers, but anyway, uh, that didn't really end up taking off. That the game might have even more variance than Pokemon, if you can believe it. But I was always looking for competitive avenues to sort of express myself and use that competitive energy. I was doing speech and debate tournaments in college, for example. So uh, I've always had some sort of aspect of that competitive spirit as part of my life, regardless of what medium it's expressed through.
So always, starting when you were 4 and started playing chess all the way through till today, you've been not only competitively gaming but doing so at a extremely high level the whole time.
It was frustrating for me because with chess I felt like I had a certain plateau that I couldn't surpass. Same thing with League of Legends, same thing with Hearthstone. Pokemon is actually the first game where, at least for a certain point, I felt like I was actually the best at X. Even if X happened to be a sort of niche tier that wasn't as popular as anything major going on, it was still a really good feeling.
So let's talk about that period, and these you can correct me if I'm wrong about this. I'm pretty sure this is all off memory. This is unscripted, but off the top of my head, the way that I remember it, during a period of call it a year and a half, short period of time, you had back-to-back dominant SPLs like X and one SPLs, one GSC Cup, one Smogon Classic, one World Cup, including beating BKC in the GSC tiebreaker while BKC was very active in GSC, and then the next year almost won Smogon Classic again. Is all of that correct?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm trying to think if we missed anything. I played Snake Draft too in a tier that I'd never played before and went 3-1, but my team really sucked.
So take us behind the scenes. I mean that is the most dominant streak competitive Pokemon has ever seen. Back to back dominant SPLs, World Cup win, Classic win, almost a repeat Classic win, and GSC Cup win. I mean, how does one do that? That's never been done ever in any tier in the history of competitive Pokemon. Behind the scenes, real life. I mean, what was that like for you? How many hours were you putting into it? How stressed were you? I mean, you're a human behind the screen. What was that like?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, during that period, which I would define as early 2018 to the middle of 2019, that's the SPL 9 through Classic 4, Classic 5. I forget which Classic it actually was, where I got banned. Basically, I had no other competitive outlets at the time. I wasn't playing other video games, and IRL, I had transferred schools, so I wasn't doing competitive speech and debate anymore. So basically, all of my mental energy, aside from what frankly little I was putting into school because it's just undergrad, uh, was being dedicated to competitive Pokemon, and it's not something that I thought at the time I was obsessing over, even though looking back, I probably was. It's just whenever I had a moment of not even physical, but just mental free time, I would always be thinking, theory crafting stuff like, oh, this is a really cool three Pokemon combination in GSC that I haven't seen used before. And I think it could really exploit X, Y, and Z players in a best of one tournament format. Or I saw Ojama bring this in black and white. Some of the French players are probably going to pick up on it. And I know I have a match with, one of them coming up in 2 weeks for black and white. So I should start developing some sort of strategy to undermine the core that Ojama's bringing because I think they bring it. That sort of stuff. And these weren't really things I had to try hard to think about. They just naturally kind of came to me, and I just rolled with it. I wouldn't really write anything down. I would just remember it, and then the next time I was at the computer, I would open Showdown and put in some team shells or open a notepad document and make a couple notes of bring this against X, bring this against Y. But I didn't feel like I dedicated that much time to it. But looking back on it, I actually spent most of my time on it. It was definitely unhealthy. It was an unhealthy relationship that I had with the game because I felt like it was finally my time to be the best, and I didn't want to let that slip away in from what I perceived to be again, because I thought I could have done it before, but just didn't.
If you had to estimate, how many hours a day or a week would you say you were putting into Pokemon during this period?
It varied because I was in school and I was working too, at least for part of that. But probably a week, hmm, like 30 ish.
It's a lot of hours.
It is. It is. I wasn't getting paid either.
So, how is it affecting you in real life? I mean, the more success, the more expectations, the more stress. I mean, what kind of what kind of toll was it taking on you trying to maintain that level of excellence over the course of a sustained period of time?
So it's both really fun and quite awful in some different ways. For example, when I initially won Classic, I thought it was the best thing ever. I was over the moon. I was really stressed leading up to those playoff sets, of course, but it was no more than the usual stress I felt when preparing for a tournament series. Just competitive stress in general. I feel like most people experience that. But after those SPL runs and after World Cup and that sort of thing, it felt like every single match that I was going into, I was expected to not only win but kind of dominate unless I was against another elite like top 5 level player. If I was against anyone else, all the people watching expected me to just destroy them. And I felt like that was kind of an unfair expectation given that Pokemon is such a game of variance in the first place, and you have to dedicate so much time in preparation to individual tournament matches if you want to have that peak edge on people. And so it just got to be really stressful and overwhelming. And especially for the second SPL where I went 12 wins and 1 loss, which I think is the best record in the history of SPL. Every win I felt, because my team expected me to win every round. Every win I felt like, yeah, okay, that was expected. I didn't feel the elation of having clutched out a big match for my team. It was just like, okay, on to the next one. What can I do to help my team? And the 1 loss I had, obviously, I was crushed. I felt terrible about it, and I actually couldn't go back and watch the replay for weeks afterward to even study what I could have done better in certain situations because it physically hurt to look at. I didn't want to acknowledge that I could fail, I guess, because everyone else was hyping me up so much and making me feel like I was something more than just a human playing video games.
So let's get to the tough questions. Let's get to. I'm going to ask you several hard questions here, and this is the meat and potatoes of what most people watching this came to see. During this time, on the field, if you will, metaphorically, you were on another level. You were absolutely dominant. Off the field, behavioral issues began to crop up. You started making some comments that were a bit inflammatory, a bit controversial in the forums. Sometimes people thought that you did not handle losing very well. There were even accusations of you being racist or making comments that were targeted at certain groups that were completely out of line. How would you respond to that, and why were those things occurring?
Part of it was the aforementioned stress of simultaneously, being viewed by much of the community as a top player, someone who, competitively speaking, could do no wrong, while also being scrutinized kind of from every angle. Because, let's face it, the unfortunate reality of the human character is that when someone is succeeding, most people's first reaction is to try to pull them down. It's the whole crabs in a bucket mentality. Whenever one of them is clawing their way out, the rest of them have to pull them back down with you. So it was a combination of those aspects that I think led me to become really inflammatory, level-headed person online or IRL. I get upset easily. I definitely have like a hair trigger when it comes to some things, and so for that reason, I never handled trash talk very well at all. And when people would come after me, I would see it as a challenge, and I would give them what I felt they deserved in return. As for the whole targeting specific groups thing, I don't really want to go into my political beliefs on here. Suffice to say, I thought Smogon as a whole was going in a direction that was going to be unhealthy for the future of the competitive scene. And I spoke out against certain groups that I felt were facilitating that degradation of the scene.
In your mind, are you racist?
No.
So you were just stating your beliefs, but it was not specifically any kind of hatred or inner dislike of a certain group.
No, there are some people I really hate, but the groups they belong to aren't really a part of that.
Okay. Would you say, in your own perspective, was your behavior ever out of line? And if so, when?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's difficult to say when because it depends the line you want to draw. I could just say, going after someone on the internet or just being inflammatory for any reason is never a good idea because it's just the internet. It's just a competitive Pokemon website. There's no reason to get so upset about those things. But at the time, I didn't have that perspective, and again, the game was a very big part of my life, so I blew things out of proportion. I can't point to any specific instances. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, let's move on to another hard question. It's your time, it's your story. Tell us in your own words. What happened with Illudan?
Oh man, I really hate that guy now. It's kind of sad because I've known Elodin since like 2014, 2015. We talked a little bit back then, but we got pretty close starting in like 2017. I was part of a server with like him, EO, Zomog, Earthworm, some other people. And we just talked a lot. We would have like late night Discord calls and that sort of thing. Things would often get like philosophical between the two of us. I felt like we agreed on a lot of the sort of defining aspects of life, that sort of stuff. And so I thought we were really good friends. And in the classic that I ended up winning in the GSC Cup, I think it was round 3 or 4. Elodin got paired with Finchinator, who is a user everybody likes to meme on from time to time. And I had been helping him with teams so far, and he suggested that we should sort of team up to take him down, and I agreed. And that's basically what happened. I hopped in the voice call with him. We played against Finch. I think we 2-0'd him, and then that was it. It was done. We didn't really talk about it again. And then we sort of had a falling out surrounding. Oh man, what was it? I think it was surrounding World Cup of Pokemon, because the U.S. West team was playing Brazil around that time, and we were just getting argumentative because it's competitive Pokemon. He said some stuff, I said some stuff. I don't really remember the details, but next thing you know, I'm waking up to find out that I've been tournament banned for ghosting in a tournament from over a year ago because Elodin decided to go and leak the logs and get himself banned for 9 months, just to get me banned for a year. So that was pretty shitty. Even if I had a situation like that with a friend who I had a falling out with and I knew I could rat him out for something he did wrong in the past, I wouldn't do it because I think that's a shitty thing to do, and I think that makes you a shitty person. But some people are shitty, and some of them live in Brazil.
So, to be clear, your version of the story, you have only, during this dominant run that you had, you ghosted one time in one match. That's it. Never again.
Yeah, that's the sad part. Is ghosting used to be really culturally not, I wouldn't say accepted, but tolerated in Smogon culture from like 2012 to 2016. You know, every team tournament I played in, behaviors on those teams occasionally constituted what would now be referred to as ghosting. And I'm sure that that was the case in every World Cup and every SPL team during that period. Uh, but after I came back, the only time I ghosted was with Elodin. And the one time, the one person I chose to put my misplaced trust in, I got burned. I think it was ultimately a blessing in disguise, though, because I was getting really burnt out of the game at that point, as you can see from my big, blow up post after I lost to McMegan.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you about next. That post is, at this point, one of the most well known, most quoted. I mean, there's memes
it,
about it everywhere. That everybody knows that post. It's like
I think it hit the front page of Reddit like a day after I posted it.
yeah, no, it might be the most famous post in Smogon history. So looking back, I mean, take us through the whole thing. How were you feeling at the time? I mean, what was the emotion behind writing up something like that? And then is there any of it now in hindsight that you regret or wish you hadn't said? Or do you stand by every word that you wrote?
So I don't stand by every word because a lot of those emotions were produced by, my World Cup team was in the finals at the time, and I was working my ass off to try to help these guys clutch out the W, which we did eventually, thank God. Uh, excuse me. And then I was in classic semifinals at the same time, and I wanted so badly, more than I wanted to win World Cup, honestly. I wanted to repeat classic because nobody had done it before. I don't think anyone had ever gone back to back in individual tournaments before. Maybe Smog on Tour. I don't know my history that well. But it was just an achievement I really wanted to have under my belt to cement me as the best old gens player of all time, because I think it would have done that if I had won that tournament. And I went 2-0 up on McMegan. We played, I think, GSC and ADV first, which are, my best tier and what I perceive to be his best tier, respectively. And then he hacked the fuck out of me in RBY. I got a terrible matchup in black and white. And then in DPP, I think his lead Gyarados flinched my Thunderbolt Jirachi like 3 or 4 separate times. And then he flinched my Breloom too. He just like flinched and crit his way through my entire team with his fucking lead Pokemon, all off of a bad lead matchup. I led Heatran because he historically was weak to it. And I guess he read me on that. And then just got one of the most baffling sequences of luck I think I've ever seen in Pokemon. And so after that, I was just like, I was so done. I was already under so much stress from the community. There were already a bunch of tensions riding high from, admittedly a lot of self-generated shit that I said. And that was kind of the last straw for me. I just lost it. I was like, this community is garbage. You guys all take yourselves way too serious. And frankly, after this, I don't give a shit about the game anymore. I'm going to help my team with the rest of their World Cup run. But after that, I'm out. See you later. None of you are worth my time. And that overarching message, I honestly stand by. I think Smogon is fucking toxic, and
Oh, we're gonna get into that. I promise.
okay. All right, I'll stop it there for now then.
Well, sticking with the message, sticking with that quit post. I mean, how much of that was actually what happened in that specific classic match versus a buildup of a bazillion smaller things and the stress and things that weren't actually that specific match against Roro?
It was a buildup that had been that started 7 years prior to that post. It started when I entered the World Cup of Pokemon in 2012, and I had a big ego, and I talked a lot of smack, and I ended up backing up my performance, and that's when the expectations began. And they fell and they rose a little bit over time, but ultimately that's when I started, and I think this is really the key to the whole puzzle. I think at that point is when I started staking my personal ego to Pokemon matches. And I think that was an unhealthy practice that I'm happy to say, after almost 8 years now, I've finally divorced myself from. But I think that is what ultimately caused all the stress, all the toxicity, what have you.
Now, was it personal at all with Roro? Do you respect him as a competitive player?
Oh man, it's not personal at all. Roro is one of the all-time greats. He's on my top 10 list without a doubt, for all-time best Pokemon players. I will say, in the 5 game set, and you can all go back and watch the replays and be your own judges. I don't care, but I think I played better than him in 4 out of 5 games, and I was pissed that I didn't take the series home. But you know what? That's the game sometimes, and I don't remember exactly if I flamed him personally, but if I did, then I definitely regret it because he's by and large a pretty nice guy, one of the nicest good players you're ever going to meet, and yeah. But looking back on it, I meant no disrespect to him.
So getting into the Smogon stuff, I was going to go with that. I mean, I'm going to let you just unload. And you and I have had these conversations at various points in our Pokemon talks or whatever. But this isn't about me. This is all about you. This is your interview. What do you see as the problems with Smogon? What did you see then? What do you see now? What is fundamentally wrong with the site and the community as a whole?
So it wasn't like I had one big moment of clarity that led me to make that post, as I think I've sort of described. It was more like a slow build. I was really into the Smogon culture from like 2012 to 2016. I was into all the trash talk and all the flame wars and all the staking people's reputations on singular games of high variance. And I think that's just fundamentally flawed. I think one of the biggest issues is that so many people think they know the game so much better than they actually do, when in reality they're just ignorant and completely blind to the subtleties of what's going on in matches between high level players, and they just chirp and chirp and chirp, and it really eats away at you if you're one of the people who who is like enlightened or whatever. I don't really know how to put it. And then simultaneously, despite this inwardly toxic culture, they still try to maintain this facade of a welcoming community where everyone is free to come and compete and give it their best, no questions asked. Whereas in reality, it's devolved into players at the top who are generating new innovations and strategies for mid to low level tournament players to parrot and perform noticeably worse with, while simultaneously using those strategies and those innovations that better people developed for them to shut everyone else out of developing a thriving and expanding community. And it essentially becomes an insular echo chamber that becomes more and more toxic over time as people become disillusioned with the fact that they're sort of living in this system that is self-perpetuating in a negative way.
Wow, fair enough. That was very well said. So where does that leave you today? Nobody had heard from you. I mean, one or two of your closest friends, but by and large, since your ban over a year ago, the community hasn't really heard from you at all. Do you play Pokemon these days? Do you care about Pokemon these days? Do you have any desire to be unbanned and come back to the game? Where does this leave you?
So it's an interesting conundrum that I find myself in because, after over a year off, I've come to recognize competitive Pokemon's actually not that bad of a game compared to a lot of other games that are considered competitive. And there's a lot of room for self-expression in playstyle, and I really enjoy, I would say, 4 or 5 of the generations. I think are excellent competitive experiences and just really fun to play. However, the premier competitive Pokemon website, forum, server, what have you, is run by a bunch of idiots and is sort of infested with people who bow to the authority of these idiots. And so it's really frustrating because it limits my options competitively. Personally, I don't have too much of a stake in the competitive scene anymore. Obviously, Zalmog, who I still talk with all the time, one of my very good friends, mentioned that this tournament was going on with you and ABR hosting and put me in contact. And, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to see how it goes. I will say I haven't played a serious game since I was banned, so no no promises as to my performance, but I'm going to try my best. And then after that, I'm obviously not going to be playing Smogon events anymore since I believe they've permanently banned me. But if something comes up and I hear about it, why not? I'm still on Discord and I still play games like Among Us or whatever, those sort of fun party games occasionally with some of my old friends from the Pokemon scene. So there's always a chance I could drop in, but I don't think I'm ever going to dedicate the level of time and intensity that I did to it in that period where I was the best.
I mean, your natural personality, you're very competitive. You hate losing. So I mean, let's say you play this tournament and you get paired against one of the players that you don't think is very good, that you don't respect very much, and you get smacked around. I mean,
It's
it
possible.
was is there any possibility that that's going to trigger something inside of you and all of a sudden make you have something to prove again, make you give a shit again and want to get right back to where you were? Fuck this. I can't believe I just lost to that guy. Let's go.
That's the thing, though, man, because I don't feel like at this point I have anything left to prove in competitive Pokemon. Like, as you said, I led my team to a World Cup victory. I won Smogon Classic. I got to semifinals of the next Smogon Classic and kind of lost on bullshit. I had one of the best SPL runs in history, followed by the best SPL run in history. So nobody can say anything about me. Like when my legacy or whatever you want to call it, I for that period, I was the best. No one can really argue with that. And, now that I've been on the mountaintop and I've seen and felt what it's like and realized it's actually not all that appealing, I don't have that drive to go back there. So I think, even in the event that in this tournament I get paired against players that I don't respect and they smash me and I go 0-2 and I'm out, I'm not going to get upset about it. I'll be maybe a little disappointed, but I'm not going to flame anyone. I'm not going to get pissed off at myself because, it's a game, it's for fun, and I've already done what I wanted to do.
So if you were to get unbanned one way or another, whether that would require an apology or kissing ass or whatever that would entail, would you come back? Would you play SPL? I mean, what can we expect if you had the opportunity to play on Smogon again?
So this is already a very unlikely universe to be theorizing about. I understand that's not part of the prompt, but most of the Smogon administrators don't like me because of some of my personal beliefs that that may or may not actually be accurate. So I don't think I'm coming back. If I were to be unbanned from the site, if I didn't have to do any ass kissing or whatever, because I'm never doing that, uh, then yeah, that's a tough one. I think I would play an SPL or something like that if a manager wanted me and if I was invited. But I just can't pour the amount of time and energy into it that I did before that led me to that insane 12-1 run. I just don't think that's humanly possible for me, given how much busier I am now than I was a couple years ago.
And as far as your legacy, you defining it yourself, I mean, again, this is your time, this is your interview. Just be blunt. I mean, just how good were you? In your own mind, were you the best competitive Pokemon player there ever was?
Not that there ever was. I think that period, it's difficult to define who the best ever was because we've seen so many different quote unquote eras of dominance by one player or another. And although some people will argue that, people were way worse 10 years ago or whatever, and the average player now could beat a top player back then, I don't really buy that. I think the game improved to a certain level and it's staying at that certain level. And I think even among top players like me or Ojama or BKC or McMegan or M Dragon or whatever, all those guys may fluctuate up and down a certain amount, but at the end of the day, it is just Pokemon. We are just clicking buttons, and there is a certain skill ceiling that I don't think it's humanly possible to surpass. Uh, I wouldn't even say it's humanly possible to to stay there for more than a game or two. Uh, but I think if we're rating it on a sort of floor to ceiling of how bad can you be versus how good as is humanly possible, I was probably up there. You know, I I don't think there's an objective way to rate it one, two, three, or whatever, but I was up there.
With GSC specifically, were you at your peak the greatest GSC of all time? Did you surpass BKC in his prime? Did you surpass Earthworm in his prime?
I think yeah. I would say Earthworm hands down. No offense to Earthworm, he's a great guy, but like GSC was really unrefined back when he was at his period of dominance. And even though it's such an old metagame, surprisingly, I feel like GSC is the one that has progressed the most during the periods that I was competitively active, just because there were so many strategies that were unexplored due to it being an underplayed tier that people thought was solved but wasn't actually. Kind of like the whole RBY situation, or ADV even after the sleep talk change. Uh, and I think I was better than BKC in my prime, but only because I dedicated more time to the tier specifically than he did, whereas he was juggling a bunch of different responsibilities with different tournaments and different tiers that he was expected to be highly proficient in. I honestly think, in terms of like raw talent, it's probably between BKC and Ojama for the most there's ever been. But I think I put the work in to surpass him for that period.
And now let's talk about today. So, if you were to play against the best GSC today, let's take the best performer from last year's SPL. Let's say Fear. If you were to play,
That
if you were to,
was the best.
if you were to play a best of five against him today, what would your expectation be?
It's so funny that you ask that because I think in both. No, I didn't play him in SPL 9, but in SPL 10, Fear was the only guy that beat me. And our game was bullshit. I've played him, I think, on 3 or 4 occasions in tournaments, and we have literally never had a good game. It's always been ridiculously one-sided, one way or the other. But I mean, in a best of 5, assuming like
Today.
even, yeah, assuming like even levels of variance, oh, I would smash him, no question.
So right now, today, having not played a serious game in a year, you'd crush him.
Yeah, I mean, I still think about the game occasionally, so I could whip up 5 teams in 20 minutes, and I'd probably win.
Wow. Hell of a lot of confidence. Yeah, so what is the future? I mean, not just with Pokemon. If you don't get back into it, if Smogon doesn't unban you, I mean, on a personal level, obviously we don't need to know too much about your personal life, but what does the future hold for you? What are you doing with yourself if this really is the end of your Pokemon career?
Interesting that you'd ask that because I've just started getting back. It's like I have a bunch of different women, and I fall out with one and I get back with the other. Now I'm back playing Hearthstone on the daily, and I'm top 50 on my server and moving up. So I'm trying to become a little bit better at that. But it's honestly just something I do for fun. I don't dedicate the insane hours to it that I used to for Pokemon, for example. Uh, and then IRL, I got my bachelor's. I'm pursuing higher education. Hopefully, gonna go abroad once this whole COVID shit is over with, and do a little studying in either East Asia or East Europe. Not sure which location yet, but sort of working that stuff out right now. And then I don't know, man. I got a lot of good hobbies going on right now. I'm getting outdoors all the time. I have a good support network of like family and friends around me. So I think like mental health wise, I'm probably doing better than I ever was during my Pokemon playing days. Not saying that Pokemon was like the reason for that. It was probably a contributing factor, but yeah, just like getting older and maturing has been a really pleasant experience.
So finally, the most important question. I mean, to wrap this all up, I'll give you an opportunity. This one might be longer. I don't know, but I mean, to everybody over the years who's watched you, whether they have admired you, whether they've thought that you're a complete jerk, whether they don't really know you as anything other than a player, whether they have been offended by you and your posts. I mean, to the Pokemon community as a whole, to all the players who have known you, what do you want to say?
Hmm. So my teammates from the past, specifically World Cup, because I love those West guys, but my SPL teammates too. Thanks for believing in me. Sorry I let you down on occasion, but I can say with complete honesty that throughout all those years, I really did try my best. And, I don't think you guys could ask for a better teammate. So I just hope I made the experience a positive one for all of you. To the people who supported me, I appreciate it. Those words of appreciation gave me a lot of confidence, and in some instances inspired me to continue playing or to push myself to new heights. Most of my motivation was internal, but it's still appreciated. To the people who hated on me, I totally get it because I was a real jerk for most of my tenure on Smogon, so can't really blame you there. Uh, I promise I'm not a bad guy in real life if you had the opportunity to get to know me, but I feel like I wouldn't want to get to know a lot of you. And to everyone else, I don't know. Don't take it too seriously. It's just Pokemon, and in the end, good players are going to get rewarded over a long stretch of time. But given the amount of games that are actually played, I think the variance is still really high, and I think you'd have to play 10 or even 100 times as many games of Pokemon as are currently going on in the competitive tournament scene to let the best really shake out and sort of have the cream rise to the top. I think over time it always happens, but if you're taking individual matches too seriously, you're just giving yourself a headache for no reason. It's really not worth it, guys.
I got another one for you. I was gonna stop, but I can go on all night. But I do have one more. I mean, reiterating your streak one more time because it's ridiculous. Back to back dominant SPLs, classic win, almost back to back classic wins, World Cup win, GSC Cup win, in a period of a year and a half. In your opinion, will that ever be beaten? Is there ever going to be a period in competitive Pokemon of more dominance than that? Do you think your legacy is ever going to be topped by anyone?
I don't think it will be because if the game continues to grow, if it starts to die off, then it's possible because then there could be one player who just stands above the rest. But I think if the game continues to be popular in a competitive sense, it won't happen because at a certain level, the difference between skill and players is so small, and the amount that you can improve is so incremental over such a long period of time that to be that dominant would require not only an insane level of skill but also an insane lucky streak. And I sincerely doubt that's ever going to happen again.
Yeah, fair enough.
So to those of you who were there, you got to witness history. I mean, be happy about it, I guess.
No, I mean, that may sound arrogant, but I agree with your opinion. I think you're probably right that the level of dominance that you displayed in that year and a half is absolutely never going to be seen again. So the next time we're all going to see you is in the Permasand Invitational. Real quick, because I mean, you haven't played in, like you said, a year. What are you expecting out of yourself? It's ADV, DPP, Black White. Realistically, how are you going to do? Which gens do you feel better against? How's that tournament going to go for you?
So my best tier is going to be ADV, and my worst is probably going to be DPP. That's kind of how it's always been for me. In Classic, my worst was always DPP, and ADV I would say is pretty comfortably my second best tier. That said, I have no idea what's been happening in the metagame for any of those three tiers for the past year. I'm probably going to watch a couple replays to try to get caught up a bit, but I will no longer be on the front lines in that sense, and I think that's going to be a competitive disadvantage for me. That said, I think my intuition and my in-game instincts are still better than most of the players in the tournament, so maybe that'll give me an edge. I don't know, but I'm going to have to start pestering some friends for teams like ASAP.
Realistically, could you win the tour?
I mean, it's possible, but if I had to, break it down into percentages, I don't think I would be on the. Let's see. Let me take a look at this list. Actually, I could be in the top five because BKC and Ojama aren't here. I forgot. They're two of the players I will always respect as two of the greats. As I said, I think they're probably tied for most innate skill ever. But they're not in this tournament, so who knows? Maybe I got a shot.
Well, I suppose that's it, boys, unless you got something else to tell us.
Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated. Lavos, thanks for joining me tonight. I know you're a busy man. Get back to your life. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Lavos, thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure, Callis. Thanks, guys.